Hi, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Square of Self-Love podcast. I am Kiatana, your self-love doctor. Oh my goodness, I love that. Yep, that's going to be it. All right, great. I am so excited about today's episode. I have been troubleshooting my video. So essentially, I plan to do a video and like an audio podcast, but the video podcast is just literally having so many troubles for me, and that's not the way I want to live my life right now. So I am overriding that by just doing an audio, and that's really what I want to do. I want to get the message out. So that's really important to me, and that's why I'm just doing audio right now. I think I'm going to stick to audio for quite a while because it just kind of is so much easier for me. So let's walk into the square. Okay, maybe I need to work on that part, but you know what I mean. I'm really excited about this episode. I recorded it, honestly, a couple months ago, but it literally hasn't been uploaded, and I've been like doing all this troubleshooting, and I was just like at my breaking point, and I was like, you know what makes sense to me is the audio version. So I'm recording this again, and honestly, I think it'll be better. It definitely kind of just like aligns with what I wanted the podcast to be anyway. I want this podcast to be in the format of questions. And so the idea behind this is that it's something that you guys can really listen to and interact with in multiple stages. Really just kind of use it as a self-reflection tool because I love podcasts. I really like listening to them, but like more often than not, I feel like they make me think and like kind of challenge my mindset in a way that I just don't usually get when it comes to just like casual conversation does that too, but I think it's just like when you're alone listening to someone and you can't really talk back, so you obviously just have yourself to talk to, I guess, but I don't know. So I really want this to be kind of like a self-reflective podcast. And so one of the other things that I want to do with this podcast, and I'm really excited about, is I want to start it off with 2.5 minutes of affirmation. And I want you to, if you're in your car, if you are, at the gym, wherever you're listening to this, I really just want you to kind of like walk through it with me the first time. If you aren't like an affirmations person, I get it. I mean, I am an affirmations person, but like it's not for everybody. So I'm not offended if you skip past it. I am pretty committed to making it 2.5 minutes. So, just skip 2.5 minutes ahead. Okay. So we're going to start here soon. If you are new to affirmations, I'll just explain how I like to do them. I don't know if this is the right or wrong way to do it, but this is the way I like to do it. So usually when I do affirmations, I like to just repeat it to myself. And like first I start by like repeating it, kind of just like to get the wording down. But then I like to repeat it to myself more to like believe it. And if you do it just consistently, usually, you do the same ones. And so over time, I would love for you to just kind of snag a few that work out for you. And then, if it helps for you to skip past this part and pause it, and then, do your own affirmations for 2.5 minutes, that's perfectly fine. And if it's, I would love to make this segment longer. And so if we get to the point where it's like everyone really loves it, then what I could do is do like 5 minutes and 1 minute for each affirmation. This one might feel like a bit of a rat race because I have 5 like written down, but depending on pacing, we might actually just like cut it down, because I think more than anything, it's important for you to really like ruminate with what's being said, spend time with each word and really make each word personal to you. I think that's when I find the most benefit out of affirmations. So These are going to be sentences, so I want them to be, long enough for you to really feel personal to them. But anyway, I'm rambling. All right, we're going to get started. Affirmation 1. I am worthy of love and respect, and I honor myself by setting healthy boundaries. I am worthy of love and respect, and I honor myself by setting healthy boundaries. Affirmation 2. My boundaries are essential for my well-being, and I embrace them with love and kindness. My boundaries are essential for my well-being, and I embrace them with love and kindness. Affirmation 3. I trust myself to recognize when my boundaries are being crossed and take action to protect my self-worth. I trust myself to recognize when my boundaries are being crossed and take action to protect my self-worth. Affirmation 4. Setting boundaries is an act of self-care that I prioritize. Setting boundaries is an act of self-care that I prioritize. Affirmation 5. I attract positive relationships and experiences when I communicate my boundaries. I attract positive relationships and experiences when I communicate my boundaries. Whew. All right. Well, I hope that was helpful for someone. And guys, please let me know how you feel about that. I'm really excited about that segment. You guys know I love segments and certain areas. So if that helped you out, please let me know. All right. If you don't already, please follow me on Instagram at @square_of_self_love, and as well on TikTok as the same thing. On YouTube, you can find me at @square_of_self_love, the same way I'm pretty sure as well. And I will just upload this episode to YouTube with like a picture or something. And then if you are listening on, Instagram, if you are listening on Apple Podcasters or Spotify Podcasters or wherever you listen to this, please leave a review and let me know how you're, enjoying the podcast. Please subscribe to my podcast on whatever listening platform you're listening, and let's get into it. All right. So today I wanted to talk about setting boundaries, and this is actually really important to me. I feel like everyone talks about, setting boundaries, but nobody really gives clear guidance on how to set and enforce those boundaries. There's often a lot of guilt around setting boundaries with people, and this is from any perspective, right? So obviously I'm talking from a place of self-love, but when you set those boundaries, I think a lot of times we think of it as, you're just telling other people no. But it's not necessarily that you're telling people no, as that you are telling yourself yes. And so it's not so much so to, cut out other people or to be spiteful. It is simply just because you deserve it and your worth and when it needs to be honored. So if you are not used to setting boundaries, I know a lot of empaths have a really hard time setting boundaries. And I feel like even if you aren't an empath per se, a lot of people, when it comes to like certain loved ones or certain personal relationships or even professional relationships, aren't comfortable setting boundaries. A lot of people have that people pleasing kind of tendency, and the world needs you guys, so don't stop being nice. But being nice doesn't have to mean that you sacrifice your self-worth. And I think that often happens with the best kinds of people, and that's not fair to you. So, sometimes you got to advocate for yourself. And I think of boundaries as doing just that. They are literally framework to advocate for yourself. So I wanted to talk about how to set boundaries, or how you can create and enforce your personal boundaries. And like I said, I want to ask questions that kind of just stimulate good conversation and good thought around, boundaries that you've set so far, how you've been with boundaries, but then also something you can come back to kind of gauge, okay, did I set those boundaries? How'd it go? And of course, I would love to hear about your guys' experiences with boundaries in general, things that you've learned, because I feel like sometimes the best things I learn are in the comments. So, maybe you could help someone as well. Alrighty, so starting off, I feel like the most important step in setting your boundaries and enforcing them is self-awareness. So think about who you are as a person. What qualities do you have that have been really helpful in helping you achieve success, but also what qualities kind of need protection, and in what ways could you set boundaries to protect yourself and just honor kind of your trajectory and where you're headed. So I know personally, I am very social. I love talking on the phone. And when I was studying for step 1, so if you aren't really aware of like the med school journey, step 1, step 2, and step 3 are all required to get your certification as a physician in the United States. So when studying for step 1, I really was like having a hard time studying, and I really needed just some boundaries to really help me focus and honor, my schedule when it came to studying. And so because I wanted to talk on the phone and I knew that about myself, I needed to establish healthy boundaries when it came to just, okay, like if I set a timeline for this phone call, like I need to honor that. And, having that self-awareness really heightens the fact that sometimes the boundaries, actually most of the time the boundaries are for you. So I think it's so funny when people are like, feel like the boundary is something to spite them, which is just hilarious to me, because it's like oftentimes we set boundaries for ourselves, and you enforce it by, informing other people that this is what you're doing, but the boundary is really for you. And so just having that self-awareness, I knew, okay, if I set a timer for when I need to get off the phone, that is what I have to honor. And like what I need to do to communicate that is then, let people know this is, when this timer goes off and it's loud enough for them to hear, this is the time I have to get off the phone. And the people who, really cared about me and loved me honored that and understood. And so that's definitely something to take into consideration that we'll talk about later on in the episode. But just a little example of like that self-awareness, recognizing that, okay, I know this is something about myself that I need to work on. And this is the boundary I'm putting in place. And that's a very like cookie cutter little like example. It's definitely not like a big example. And I feel like setting small boundaries for myself led up to me setting boundaries for others when it came to like interpersonal relationships and things like that. And so you really have to just start with looking at yourself, of course, and start with recognizing, okay, where could I set boundaries and, really implement them in a way that I'm comfortable with, but also in a way that's going to help my trajectory. I really want to make it clear that I think that boundaries are crucial in all aspects of your life. Like, I don't think that boundaries are just for intimate relationships, or even like familial relationships. I think it's huge to have boundaries for the work environment. I think it's huge to have boundaries for yourself when it comes to food and dietary habits. And I don't think it's necessarily that you have to be on a diet, but I think like eating in moderation is something that our society talks about, but definitely doesn't encourage or even enforce. It actually works very far against it. But I think like overall, I think it's really important to recognize that boundaries are literally everywhere in our life. And having healthy boundaries is what gets people to success. And so having that spirit of self-awareness is really going to be important when you start to really consider what boundaries you need. And so I have some questions jotted down just to like get that thought process going. So the first one is going to be, how often do I take time to reflect on my emotions, needs, and values? So think about that. Great. I don't know if this is like super awkward. I don't know if you guys would be annoyed if I like talk through it. I think I'm just going to talk through these questions and then, obviously pause it or skip through if I'm talking too much, but I think that could be helpful. So the first one, being, how often do I take time to reflect on my emotions, needs, and values? And that could be time consuming. I'm not saying, spend an hour doing it a day, but I think just something to consider, maybe it's time that you set aside 30 minutes in the morning, or even 20 minutes in the morning when you're riding, in your car, and just really reflect on your emotions. When was the last time you were angry? And what was the situation? Was it something that you feel like could have been avoided? Was it something that you feel like you could have done to keep the situation from getting to the point it was? Or, was it completely out of your control? And is it more of a reflection on whether or not this needs to be someone in your life or this situation in your life? What are your needs? And we often, I know, like in the African American community, I'm just going to be candid, I feel like we see it as, if I have a roof over my head, if I have an automobile, if I have, the basic needs and a little bit more to just make myself happy, then I'm good. But really give yourself the grace to think about, like, what are your needs? Like, you personally, we don't all have the same personal needs. Yeah, we all have the same, like, metabolic needs, and we all have the same, and we all don't even have those, but like, we all have the same basic needs, right? Like food, water, shelter, whatever. But personally, right? Do you need a hug? Do you need someone that you can confide in, that you trust? Like, do you feel like you don't trust anybody around you, right? Like, that was what I was feeling like at one point in my life. Like, what are your needs? And not even on a social level, do you need to cry? Do you need to laugh? Like, what are your personal, emotional needs right now? And then what are your values, right? Like, what's important to you? What is most important in your life that you want to acquire and achieve? So just things to think about. And then the next question, can I identify specific situations or relationships where my boundaries have been violated? Oof. So this is a strong question. But honestly, I think we all can consider situations where we feel like, wow. And I know I am in this situation because I am upset at a person, but really I don't have a reason to be mad at them. It's me that I should be mad at. It's usually me that I'm mad at because I know my value. I know my worth. I know what I'm capable of. Why did I allow this form of disrespect? I mean, I feel like when someone violates my boundaries, that is a form of disrespect, but it is me disrespecting me when I let them violate that boundary, You think about, I think of self-love as, the ways that I love my mom, the ways that I love just different people in my life, in my personal life. And if I wouldn't let somebody do that to them, if I'd stand up for them, then why would I allow it to happen to me? And that's how I like to think about things like this. So, can you identify specific situations or relationships where your boundaries were violated? And for me, absolutely. But we'll get into that. I'm really excited because this month I want to talk about, this is a tangent, but it'll be brief, I promise. I really want to talk about like relationships and self-love for the month of February, which is also why I'm about to like really just like shoot out a bunch of episodes literally in a week. But I'm really excited to talk about love and self-love. Because I feel like that is really where I saw my self-love journey blossoming, and it really just like grew so much in my relationships. And anyway, so that's a little snippet, little commercial break. All right, we're back. So the next question that pertains to self-awareness, and this is the last one for this part. Do I notice any physical or emotional signs when my boundaries are being crossed? And this is real. This is like big for self-awareness. I know when I am having my boundaries crossed, I'm trying to think of like one in particular example, but it's often like this feeling that I'm like upset with myself. Like I said, like upset with someone, and I want to communicate why I'm upset with them. And it gets to a point where it's like, what more did I expect? Like, I've dealt with this person before. We have been it. You know what the zinger is for me? Here it is. You ready? You ready? Okay. It is when I am looking at the situation, saying things, and I know we've been in this exact situation before. We've had this conversation before. I have argued this point before. I am almost like repeating an entire experience over again. And you know it's bad when it's the second time, the third time, the fourth time, the fifth time. And it's like the same person you keep having the same experiences with over and over and over. And at some point, and I kid you not, guys, this is legitimately how I felt. Like mid-paragraph that I'm typing, mid-discussion, I gotta look at myself and say, girl, what did you expect? What else did you expect from this person? They have shown you exactly who they are, the way they behave, the way they think, the way they handle situations. And here you are, expecting an orange to fall from an apple tree. What are we doing? We got to walk away and find a new tree. And that is exactly what it took. And so I think just mentally, that is the moment. And it's happened to me so many times. I mean, literally, oh my gosh, it has happened so many times in my past where it's like, I am looking at the situation for what it is. And I'm like, wow, this is literally like, it's going to keep happening unless I walk away from the situation, unless I make a boundary here. And so that's something to really consider, jot that down. I feel like these are great questions to really just like write in your journal about, and just reflect on, because that's really what it takes to recognize where you need to implement a boundary. Okay, that first point was like really long. So I'm going to try not to do the other ones super long because I do have 5 points. So when it comes to creating and enforcing personal boundaries, number 2 is going to be clear communications. You want to express your boundaries with assertiveness and directness. So don't be rude. Do not be rude. Please don't be rude. But don't let people gaslight you into thinking that implementing a boundary or communicating a boundary is rude at a baseline. Like, no, that's not what it is. So you want to be, respectfully assertive. You want to use I statements to communicate your needs and expectations without blaming or accusing others. Okay. So be consistent in reinforcing your boundaries. Okay. This is big. Like, when you communicate a boundary, because a lot of people don't like confrontation, and that is a lot of the reason that people get away with overstepping what is very clearly like a boundary for most people. And I'm talking like the big ones, right? Like someone who constantly pops up in your life to ask for money, and like doesn't check on you, doesn't ask how you are. Like that's never happened to me, because people know my situation. They know I'm not the one to ask for money simply because I'm a med student. Like, okay. But, it's definitely just one of those areas where I feel like a lot of people can relate. But so definitely when you have those situations, express the boundary. And sometimes it's simply just I recognize, okay, come on, I statement. I recognize that it seems the only time I hear from you is when you're in need of something. Now, that is just something you're recognizing, right? Just something that's coming to your attention. Or, when it comes to just people who pop up in your life because they want intimacy, I feel like you only come to me when you like intimacy. Or I'm recognizing a pattern that you contact me during these hours. Or you could even say, I would prefer to hang out with you in a more public setting. Oh, because that'll get them quiet. I would prefer that you make a date with me. Simple as that. And I've said these things. That's something I can definitely relate to. But we're going to talk about, the people who, I can just bring it up now. Someone leaving or exiting your life because you've communicated a boundary is more of a reflection on how they feel about you. I'm going to say that again. Someone exiting your life because you implemented a boundary is more of a reflection on how they feel about you than how you are and your importance and your impact. You clearly set up a gate where they were coming and going freely, okay? You started putting a toll where they were speeding through without a worry, okay? So this boundary was necessary. That's your indication. When somebody's like, oh, well, this is just absurd, okay? This is unnecessary. You never had a boundary here before, and now all of a sudden you mean to tell me you have a problem with me coming to you every other Tuesday because I need $10, $15, $20, $80. Now it's a problem? Yes, it's a problem. And then feed them silence. Silence is very enriching. It's nourishing to the body. Give them silence. There you go. So that's definitely something that indicates you should have then implemented this boundary. So when you communicate it and when you use healthy communication, because I'm going to have an episode on healthy communication because that is a zinger on itself. But when you have healthy communication and someone meets that with combativeness or blame or defensiveness, you can safely rest knowing that you communicated your point clearly. And then they can go, off on and on however they please. You don't have to combat with violence or, anger, hostility. I feel like assertiveness does not equate aggression. And that is really important to recognize. When you're assertive, it might be uncomfortable, but you don't have to be aggressive. And someone who meets your boundary with defensiveness, like I said, I could reiterate that over and over, but they simply appreciated your lack of boundary in the first place. So they benefited from your lack of boundary. So the questions to think about when it comes to clear communication: how effectively do I express my boundaries to others? And this is important. I feel like I know so many people who are passive aggressive. And honestly, passive aggression really does get under my skin. It is the most frustrating form of communication because I am not a guesser. I'm very bad at guessing people. And it takes a lot more time than I'm willing to. Like, I need people to communicate. And so to some degree, that's kind of unrealistic. Like, some people aren't going to be able to communicate everything all the time. But at least try. Like, even if you tell me, look, I'm upset, I don't really know why or how to handle this, but give me some time to figure it out. Like, I can respect that. But when it comes to like passive aggression, right? Like side comments or like loop-de-loop around the world kind of things that are trying to like pull out different concepts that you really just want to ask one question. But instead of asking one question, you like make snide assumptions. Like, it's the craziest thing in the world to me. How am I supposed to, like, first of all, what do I say half the time? Like, anyway, this is passive aggression, but you want to communicate your boundaries effectively. So don't be passive, and don't use passive aggression because that's still a form of aggression. Like, that's why I said, be assertive, just literally say it. So, really just, I find that it's easy to communicate in the form of questions with people, even if you know the answers. Like, the questions aren't, I've learned, I can't remember where I learned it from, but it's like emotional, what am I trying to say? Emotional intelligence. There we go. Like, a sign of emotional intelligence is that you ask questions to people as a way to get them to think. And so, if you are not comfortable with just giving straight statements with, is fair, ask it in the form of questions, right? Like, what appeals to you about me the most that you asking to someone, or even like, what is my weakness, right? If we're looking at the boundaries you need to set for yourself, like, what is my weakness that's holding me back? Ooh, that's a gem. Oof, because I've asked myself that, and yep, there's a very clear answer. It's chocolate. But so yeah, anyway, that's the first question. The second question for clear communication is, am I able to articulate my needs and expectations assertively and without aggression? Okay. So that kind of, seeps back into number one, but that is a real question to ask yourself. And if the answer to this is no, that is okay. Honestly, if the answer to any of this is no, it is okay. You are answering all this on your own, to yourself, whatever. And my point is not to, embarrass you or call you out for whatever, like, reason. It is really just to gauge like self-reflection. Like, that is one of the things that I feel like everyone talks about being so important, but like nobody really walks us through it. So these are like some questions to just stimulate self-reflection. Okay, and number 3, do I follow up with clear consequences if my boundaries are disregarded? So that's important because that's also something you have to consider. There's a good chance your boundary is going to be like overstepped by someone. And I think once you have, communicated that boundary, everyone's human. And I'll actually give you an example of when I overstepped someone's boundaries. A good friend of mine was kind of talking, just telling a story. And I was kind of distracted with like the seating that I had. Like, I felt like I was kind of in an awkward position from her. And I also was kind of an awkward position from like the rest of the table because we were kind of in a group setting. And so in the middle of her story, I kind of just like moved seats without really explaining what I was doing. And she was, kind of offended by that. She was like, yeah, I don't really like that. And in the moment, she didn't necessarily communicate this, but like her mood or just like her whole kind of vibe changed. And so, on talking later, like the next day, she expressed to me, yeah, like I feel like when you moved seats while I was talking, like I just felt kind of disrespected. Like I really didn't like it. And first thing I did, like, because in the clear communication, like first thing you want to do is express, okay, your boundary was like disregarded. And I didn't necessarily know this was a boundary of hers, but like, social awareness, like I could have probably thought about it a little longer and put 2 and 2 together and been like, okay, maybe I should like kind of politely go about this. And, so when she told me about that, first thing I did was thank her. Thank you for sharing with me, feeling comfortable to talk to me about this. I feel like a lot of people will just up and dip, right? Like up and just be like, nope, not mess with her, write her off completely, like disrespectful, rude, doesn't regard for any piece of humanity, like the most extreme. But, she talked to me, and I know that's not easy for people to do. It's not easy to tell someone, hey, like this hurt my feelings. It's so funny. Like we learn that as kids, but it's just not easy to do. So the first thing I did was thank her. And then after that, I said, you know what? I appreciate you telling me. I am sorry for not putting more insight into or thought into, that step. I feel like this is absolutely something to consider. And ever since then, I've really tried to think about, just when I'm with that friend, being present, when I'm with that friend, not letting myself get distracted. And even when I'm with other people, because like, she's not the only person who I've probably done this to, they probably just didn't say anything. So when I'm with people, I really try to be present and just like listen to what's going on and engage in the conversation. And that's important in general, right? Like focus is literally a diagnosis when you don't have any. So it is important. So you should always have just like follow-up consequences and, with when your boundaries are disregarded. But before you act on those consequences, you should really talk to the person about how you feel your boundary was disregarded. And when you've already kind of communicated that boundary to begin with, this should be a very easy conversation, right? this should be and this is for like the boundaries that you obviously know about. If they didn't know about the boundary, like, I guess the first conversation would be you telling them that it was disregarded. But then, like, once it's clearly communicated, like, hey, this is a boundary that I have, bring it to their attention that they disregarded it. Because sometimes it could just be a matter of, oh, like, I wasn't aware at that time. I'm so sorry. And I recognize, like, okay, not everybody knows how to apologize, or like, not everybody is good at apologizing, or I don't even know if I'm good at apologizing, but I know that, like, I kind of try to think about my apologies and like not place the blame on anyone or anything like that. So when it comes to, you know, bringing it to their attention, it may just take a conversation for them to realize, oh, like, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize, and I will do my best to like not do that in the future. That's great. That's literally, and I think, you know, now I think about it, she literally thanked me for like being easier to like bring that to her attention. And I'm like, yeah, like, life is hard enough. Like, you shouldn't have to be like fighting for your life and fighting to advocate for yourself. Like, no, like, literally, I get it. That's completely reasonable. I can definitely respect that. But like, maybe not everybody's like that, but when they are not like that, like I said, because we know this is my soapbox, so I'm not going to go back into it. But when they are defensive, when you tell them about your boundary, there's more to be looked into there. And so that is definitely something to consider. But, okay, I have delved into that point and I'm going to move on. So number 3 on how to create and enforce your personal boundaries is practice saying no. Yep, just like that. I want you to repeat after me. I want you to give me a calm, cool, collected, and ready no. Period. Okay? You ready? No. Period. No. Period. There you go. See? You're doing it already. You're killing it. So honestly, I feel like as a woman, it's so often that we feel bad for saying no. And I'll even say empath, right? Because there's men and women who cannot say no for literally to save their own life. And so if you are an empath, or if you just struggle with saying no, right? Like, we don't even have to box it in. Some people just don't know how to say no. So if you are uncomfortable saying no, that is okay, but you need to practice it, because sometimes no is necessary, okay? Honestly, we might have to repeat that too. So repeat after me. No is necessary. No is necessary. All right, you did great. I love that. Clap it up for yourself. So let's get into it. When it comes to saying no, you really have to understand that it's not selfish, okay? This is an act of self-respect. This is how you show that you love yourself, okay? And we have to say no without apologizing first. Like, I'm sorry, but it's a no, okay? No. Even if you are sorry, does that change the no? Like, just say no, okay? And you have to recognize, like, you know, no offense, but no. Or, you know, like, why would they be offended if this is, you know, some things, well, even then, like, sometimes it's just a no. And sometimes no is, you know, a no from one person really does. I feel like if a lot more people would tell me no in some cases where they just kind of like beat around the bush and made it more uncomfortable for both of us, then like, it would have really just saved everybody more time if they would have just said no. And I feel like those people who struggle with saying no, I urge you to really consider, like, what experiences have led you to feeling bad about saying no? Why do you feel like no is not a tool that you can use? Because I will give a no without any explanation at all whatsoever. Because really, whatever explanation I give, it's still a no. And, you know, there's a polite way to say no. You know, no, thank you. Or no, that doesn't really fit into my agenda. No, I'm not really comfortable with that. That is about all the explanation I'm going to give. No, I have a boundary against that. No, this actually doesn't align with who I'd like to be. No, this goes against my values. Like, bring it back home. Like, that's pretty much all the explanation I would give. and I say all this, like, I am uncomfortable telling certain people no still. And that is just, I say all this to say, like, I'm not perfect. It's still hard. But at the same time, like, I know that no is necessary in a lot of cases because, like, even as a student, if I said yes to everything that came to me, I literally would be drowning in all these responsibilities that have nothing to do with my degree. So recognizing that no is necessary. So we're going to get into our questions. How comfortable am I with saying no to requests or situations that go against my boundaries? So think about it. Like, do you get super uncomfortable when you have to say no to something? Do you often say yes to a bunch of stuff that you regret later? I feel that. Yep, that's been me. But how are you with saying no? I often struggle with when somebody comes to me and I owe them a favor, or I feel like I'm in debt to them in some way, like personally, or if it's somebody that I really want to impress. And I let's put it into a relationship perspective. There was a guy that I really liked, and this was like in my younger years, but there was a guy I really liked, and I felt like I just like had to take every opportunity he gave me or he wouldn't like me. And so I just felt like I couldn't say no. But the flip side to that is that literally sometimes you have to say no because that enforces a sense of respect for you in that person. They respect you more when you say no, when you have boundaries for yourself, because that's necessary. Like, boundaries are necessary. So anyway, do I recognize any guilt or anxiety when asserting my boundaries? And how do I manage those feelings? If you know you're going to have anxiety around saying no to someone, if you're going to have guilt about it for the next week, if you're going to think that person is mad at you, that is okay. But you also have to consider the flip side of that. What if you tell them no and they just say, oh, okay, I understand. What if you tell them no? Perfect example. I used to have so many friends who would be the friends who don't know how to say they don't want to go out. I feel like that's a trend on social media. Like, the friends who would be like, oh, we'll see. But then they're like low-key partying to themselves when the plans get canceled. It's like, why not just say no? I used to tell my friends, like, if it's a no, if you don't want to go out, please stay home, because I don't want to go out with the people who didn't want to go out anyway. That's not fun. Like, the people who don't want to be there but go anyway. Imagine how you are at work. Are you fun? Are you exciting? Are you a ball of energy? Did you want to go to work? Exactly. Like, it's not going to change. Like, if you don't want to go out, please tell me no, because I definitely don't want to drag the person out who would have loved to be in bed. And I say that not because my friends aren't fun, like, they're fun to me, but I just know me personally. I'm not fun when I go somewhere I don't want to be. Like, think about it. Like, don't have anxiety. If you have anxiety around saying no, think about the experience that really triggered all of that. A lot of times I feel like some people are guilted and made to feel bad because they say no. And then that leads into a lifetime of decisions that they didn't even want for themselves. And so you really have to think about that. Like, really dive into yourself and understand, why am I so uncomfortable saying no? What was the example, or who was the person? Because sometimes it's a person who was in your life that constantly made you feel bad for saying no. And though that person may not be in your life anymore, those habits are still there. You are still very much so attached to just kind of being a people pleaser. But you have to realize, to be a people pleaser means that it's actually at the expense of yourself. And that's not fair to you. So definitely think about that. And we'll get back into the next part. Okay, so number 4 in how to create and enforce personal boundaries is self-compassion. And so this is important, as they all are. I say this is important to all of them, but you should really understand that setting and enforcing boundaries may evoke discomfort or guilt initially. And so you really want to just practice that self-compassion and acknowledge that those feelings are, natural, and you don't want to judge yourself, right? You want to remind yourself that prioritizing your needs are necessary for your overall happiness and fulfillment. Okay. You need this. Okay. this is for you. This is a sign that you love yourself. This is like you giving yourself like hypothetical flowers. Like you are doing something for yourself, honoring yourself because you know your worth, you know your value, and you know where you're headed. And this is important. Okay. So when you're giving yourself that self-compassion, don't like bash yourself, right? Like that guilt is often like so heavy that you almost like in some cases will turn around and change our minds. Like you don't want to have that. You really want to be kind to yourself in this moment and just give yourself space, right? So in anticipation for that self-compassion, I have these questions. So we're going to think about these. How do I respond to feelings of guilt or discomfort when enforcing my boundaries? So you know that guilt is going to come up, right? Plan for that, right? I feel mad at myself for this. Journal about it, write it all down, okay? And then walk through, why do I feel guilty in the first place, right? Like, why do I feel bad? Did I owe this person a night out? Well, maybe, but like you want to get up in the morning and you don't have to justify that to anybody. You don't have to explain that to anybody. And if this friend is, understanding, and if you want future invites, but this is just a bad time, this is a very like specific situation, but if you want like future invites, just communicate that, I got to say it's a no tonight, but I really do want to go out, this next weekend that I'm available. So please, if you find anything or I might be looking for things to do, that's a perfect time to go out. Maybe they made a last minute plan with you. That's what I want you to think about. Like, you don't want to have guilt or discomfort when enforcing those boundaries. And if you do have guilt or discomfort, how are you going to respond? Don't cave. Do not cave. You really want to honor your boundary. Write about it, journal. You can, I've been practicing doing audio journaling because I really enjoy that. You can do your audio journal if that helps. Maybe you can compromise in some way. So like an example would be maybe my boundary is 48 hours and, I am willing to, now I'm not saying compromise on your boundaries, but if I have it within my schedule and I really want to see this person, to see them more than 28 hours, but less than 48 hours, then maybe I'd make that accommodation. But that is at your will. If you don't want to compromise on your boundary, which I do not recommend, stick to your boundary or find a compromise with them. No, I'm not available in the next 48 hours, but I will be available on, this day, 3 days from now. Or, I'm happy to meet with you literally 2 days, on the 2 days. So maybe that is my compromise. But you really want to anticipate those feelings in a way to respect your boundary. Okay, next question is, do I offer myself kindness and understanding during moments of boundary setting and reinforcement? And so really think about that. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the first one. And then the third point, can I acknowledge and celebrate my progress in prioritizing self-care and self-respect through boundary enforcement? Okay? Because that's really what we're working towards. You want to be proud of yourself. You want to think back to how this boundary wasn't present before and how it's really impacted you after you implemented it. And so that's something that you're really working towards, and it's not going to be easy, but listen to this episode if it's not like all over the place. I'm sorry, but listen to this episode when you need to, because you're walking in the right direction. Like if I can validate you in any way on your self-love journey, it is you are walking in the right direction. You are doing all the steps that need to be done. And you're working on yourself. And that's the hardest part, but it is the most fulfilling. So we're going to move to the next point because I feel like this episode might be a little lengthy, but I think it'll be fine. I don't know. I hope you guys like it. So the final point in creating and enforcing your personal boundaries are boundary reinforcement. So this is something that you might have to do often, and you really have to be confident in the fact that the more you enforce your boundaries, the easier it will get with just like communicating them. And then it'll also be something that people just know about you. And they will honor that if they want to be in your life. the easiest way to see how people felt about me, how they respected me, what they valued about me was by implementing boundaries. And if you want the true testimony, I saw the most genuine forms of people when I implemented boundaries that they did not like, or that they were like boundaries in places that they were benefiting the lack of boundary from. And they were comfortable in taking advantage of. That was the biggest thing. And one of the areas that I feel like is the best indication for people who are looking for serious relationships, implement a sexual boundary. And I like, for me personally, I really do want to like have a sexual boundary for at least like the point at which I am getting married. Because I truly feel like it is just great to see who is like really down for the cause and wanting to be in my life. I mean, perfect example, if you've ever like denied someone sexually because you didn't know them, which I've done, I mean, plenty of times. And I feel like that really does show why somebody's in your life. I'm sexually attracted to men, so I will use men as my example, but you know, whoever your ideal partner is. For me, if I told a man no, if I turned him down for sex and he like ghosted me, fine, like, thank you. The boundary worked. And you have to realize, just because somebody leaves, like, because you placed a boundary, that person wasn't there for you. I think of boundaries not as walls, but as steps. Like, literally, if I have a step that's this tall and somebody shorter or like not able to get over that step, then they clearly were not headed towards me. Like, so yeah, no. So if I told a guy no for like, you know, intimacy and he dipped, like, okay, fine, great. That's one less guy I have to worry about. And you cannot operate from this place of like desperation when it comes to boundaries. You deserve boundaries. Like, if you implement a boundary, I cannot stress this enough. Like, if you are avoiding implementing boundaries because you feel like it's going to scare somebody away, because I've definitely been there. Let's talk about it. Young man that I was so in love with, clearly was not in love with me. And I wanted to be his girlfriend. He did not want a girlfriend. And in that moment, a more awake and self-aware and self-loving me would have looked at the situation for what it is and said, okay, girl, this is not a loving relationship. And this is a relationship that this man has communicated he doesn't want to be a boyfriend. Stop being a girlfriend to single men, or this single man in particular. And I should have walked away from the situation, kept it cute, been friends, you know? Okay, yeah, we can be friends. We will not be engaging sexually in anything, you know? I will not be, you know, cooking meals for you. Oh, because y'all, I was full-fledged, like, if girlfriend was a badge to earn in Girl Scouts, I was literally working top of my scout for it, like doing all the things girls. And when I tell you, it got me nowhere, but hurt, sad, and ashamed. So when I tell you, I'm speaking from a place of serious like experience. Like, had I set a boundary, I was so afraid if I set a boundary, if I stopped, well, what if he goes away? What if he finds someone else? What if? Well, surprise, he literally went away. And he literally, I mean, I don't know what he's doing with his life now, but I can only assume he found somebody else. And literally, that is the idea, is that had I set that boundary sooner, I would have started my self-love journey sooner. I would have, well, and honestly, I'm thankful for that experience because it did trigger quite a beautiful self-love journey. But, you know, I could have got to that self-love journey sooner. I could have made space for the man who actually belonged in my life. I could have been focusing on other things that I really should have been focused on at the time. So, you know, when you implement those boundaries, realize that the lack of implementing boundaries is also costing you. It is costing you time. It is costing you mental wellness, emotional wellness, resources. It is costing you opportunities, because the time you are invested in whatever this person needs from you or whatever you're indulging in that you shouldn't be, you know, it's taking away from, the lack of boundaries, you know, in dietary habits, may be costing you in health, right? Like, if you, I know me personally, when I have a sweet tooth, nothing but God can keep me from it, okay? So if I'm just constantly indulging in that sweet tooth, it's going to literally, I'm cavity central. Like, it's going to cost me in health. So just thinking about, like, we're so afraid to enforce those boundaries and reinforce those boundaries, because what if it gets rid of people? But recognize, when people love you and they want to be in your life and they really are honoring you and they value you, a boundary won't scare them away. And if it does scare them away, then it's working. It's doing exactly what it should be doing. Think of it as like, if you have a wound and then you put a Band-Aid on it. I know, like me as a kid, I used to hate using Band-Aids because then it would be sticky and it would hurt when you lift it up. But so if you put a Band-Aid on it, it's doing, and it sticks, right? It's doing what it should be. Like, it's doing exactly what it should be doing. Or like an antiseptic, right? Like, sometimes they sting. Like, if you burn yourself or something, you gotta spray something on it and then it stings or whatever. It's working. Like, it's doing what it's supposed to do. It's fighting off what should not be there. And that's a very medical example. I'm so sorry, but I can't stress that enough. Like, implementing a boundary may mean you lose somebody. That is a very, very, very real possibility. But please rest in the fact that if that person, or if you lose what you love, right? Like, let's say you love eating cupcakes. I mean, I love eating cupcakes. So like, it's going to hurt. It's going to be uncomfortable, but know that that is a very temporary hurt. That is a temporary hurt. And, you may miss that person, that presence, those experiences, but you can't ignore the fact that they walked out of your life, or, that absence is for your benefit. If this is all they were in your life for, they were only there to literally gain whatever it was they were gaining. And then as soon as you put up a boundary, they were like, nope, I'm good. Bye. And that's a great example of, okay, that is exactly why I put this boundary up. So we could go on and on. This is really my jam, but just be comfortable in reinforcing that boundary. And, continuously evaluate and adjust your boundaries as needed. Monitor your interactions and assess whether your boundaries are being respected. Just because, somebody's been in your life 10, 12, 15, 20 years, and, I love this person, it's my best friend, it's my homie, it's my lover, it's my partner, whatever, they can disrespect your boundary, literally. And even if you let them disrespect a boundary 10, 20 times, that 25th time, you have the right to say, okay, look, I'm fed up. It's over. I can't do this. And that's fine. Like, but really you have to be comfortable reinforcing that boundary. And then if your boundaries are crossed, assertively communicate the violation and reinforce your boundaries with firmness and self-assurance. Like, remember, this is for you. And then if you need help, get help with this. A trusted friend, family, or a mental health professional, anyone to help you maintain consistent boundary enforcement. Because it's hard and it's not easy. If you have your self-love accountability partner, go to them and really let them know, hey, I'm struggling with this. So let's get to the questions that I have for boundary reinforcement. How do I consistently monitor and reinforce my boundaries in various areas of my life? So that's a real question. In what ways are you going to monitor these boundaries? I find that after an encounter that I'm not necessarily happy about, I reflect on that and I think about, why am I so uncomfortable with this situation? Is this a conglomerate of situations that kind of build on a personal relationship of mine? Is this something that I feel like can be discussed, mitigated? Because if I feel like I bring something to someone and they just get defensive and they really kind of miss the point, or, maybe I bring it to them and they still kind of continue to do it. I mean, the effort's there. Because I can, for the most part, respect effort. But if I recognize that it's continuing to happen, I'll just kind of drop the situation altogether. And I still communicate that. I'll say, hey, look, I just don't feel like at this time we are benefiting one another. I don't think it's a really healthy relationship. And so I think it'd be better to just go our separate ways. That's something to consider. how do you consistently monitor and reinforce your boundaries? Second question, am I able to assertively address boundary violations without wavering or compromising? This is hard, okay? This is hard, and this is important. And you will have to try and really lean on your support when it comes to this one, because it will be painful, babes, okay? It will not be fun. It will be sad. Your girl, look, I set a boundary and lost great relationships with my good friends, and it hurt. It was really hard. And well, see, the thing is, after I set those boundaries, true character types came out, and I feel like it was very much needed. But I just feel like it's definitely one of those situations where it's like you have to trust that boundary was necessary, and you have to trust that the people who love you and respect you and want to be in your life to any capacity will honor that. They will not be, offended. They will not be bothered by your boundary. They will embrace your boundary, might even celebrate it because they love you, and it's a sign that you love you, and that's important. So stick to your boundary, put it out there, and I really want you to try. If you are not a person that sets boundaries, give it a month where you just set the boundary the way it is and you communicate it and watch what happens, right? Try just the raw form of the boundary, okay? Because you never know if the boundary's good if you never give the raw form. If you're always modifying it, changing it, maybe this works, maybe it doesn't. Well, this person knows this form of the boundary. You got an iPhone version 15.6 boundary. Because the girls love a nuanced version. But anyway, so that's the second question. And then the third question. Do I seek support from trusted individuals or resources when facing challenges in maintaining my boundaries? And so we talked about this, make sure to have your resources for support when it comes to these boundaries, because when I tell you it's hard, and I feel like 2023 was definitely the year I was implementing boundaries and nobody liked it. I felt like I was implementing boundaries, and it was not only did the people who I was implementing boundaries to not like it, but I was implementing personal boundaries that I wasn't a fan of because I was going to the gym 4 days a week, and I was tired and I was overworked. And I think in a lot of ways I needed that support. And when I communicated that need for support, my support understood. But it definitely took just a period of me feeling like I didn't have any support when it came to implementing my boundaries. And that was really hard. But I had to really trust that what I was doing was for me, though no one else at the time, and this is all to say I wasn't talking to my therapist about it, but I think had I shared it with her, she definitely would have reinforced it and supported it. But I definitely feel when it comes to you not really feeling like you have support, you have to trust that your boundary is necessary. I cannot stress this enough. And if you need, please reach out, DM me. I'm happy to talk about how necessary the boundary probably was. But realize, and I really want to emphasize this, you don't need anyone to validate your boundary, okay? You don't need anyone to validate your boundary. If this boundary is necessary and it's for you and it's personal to you, it is for you. You are the person to benefit from this. I don't want to talk in circles, but do not feel bad about implementing your boundary. Okay. That is the episode. I'm so excited to get this recorded. I literally was planning this for weeks, and I was like, oh, I don't want to re-record this episode because the video recording was actually really good. And I was so excited because I got my new setup. But anyway, I'm going to put this everywhere that I can, and I hope you like it. If you like it, please rate this episode on all the podcast listening platforms. And please comment and let me know how you feel about it. If it helped you, if you implemented boundaries recently, you love it, please tell me all about your experiences. And yeah, if you don't already follow me on the social medias, look me up at _of_self_love. And I look forward to talking some more. As always, this is another episode of Square of Self-Love podcast with Kiatana, your self-love doctor. And don't forget to love yourself. Bye.